Okay, I guess we're ready to go, right? Okay. Well, welcome to spring. It's definitely here. In the past, I've given this talk in February, and it's much more fun to do it now because some of the flowers we'll be looking at today are already in bloom. I was just down in Oklahoma looking at the total eclipse. And it was really neat being in the woods because there were a lot of really early spring flowers down there. And that's really my favorite time of year, probably because I'm so starved for, looking at some beautiful flowers. Okay, so the purpose today is to give you a basic introduction to the wildflowers of Colorado. It's broken up into two sections. The first section is kind of the work session. And we'll talk about how plants are named, because that's basically what you're trying to do today, is to walk out and say, oh yeah, that's a dandelion. And then we'll talk about in order to figure out how plants are named, you've got to get familiar with plant morphology, which are the shapes and the colors of the flowers. And then we will begin to identify the major groups of flowers, and one of the groupings is in families. So we're going to be looking at plant families. In the first section, we're going to do 10 of the major plant families that cover maybe 70% of all the plants in Colorado. And then in the second section, you can kind of kick back, and I'm going to take you on some tours of some wonderful walks around some of the Colorado cities where most of us are located. Maybe, yeah, I would probably the most of us are in the cities. And then we'll go on some more extensive walks in the different life zones. Life zones being on the plains, that we're at less than 6,000 feet altitude, on the east slope and the west slope, because they're quite different. And then we're going to do walk up in the foothills, which is 6,000 to 8,000 feet. And then the montane, which is 8,000 to 10,000 feet. Subalpine, which is 10 to 11,500. And alpine, which is over 11,500. And you'll see that as you go into these different life zones, you get, a lot of different associations of plants. And I'll talk also a little bit about plant communities. And during those walks, we'll look very briefly at 14 more plant families, which will end up covering a good chunk. Okay, for the first thing that we want to talk about is how flowers are named. In Colorado, there are 2,797 or so plant species. And some of those are split down into varieties and subspecies, which would add another 649 plants, for a total of 3,322 plants. 84% of these are native, which means that they've lived here. They were here prior to Columbus coming and messing up our plant communities. 16% of them, or 525, are rare. And 108 of them are endemic, which means that they're only found in Colorado. So the question is, how do you remember all of these names? And in the before 1700, people used common names for plants. But the problem with common names is they varied based on where you were and what people called them in their local areas. This guy, the common dandelion, which I'm sure you're all familiar of, you're probably pulling it out of your lawn all the time, is one of the most international plants. It's found everywhere. It's found in every altitude. It's found in every continent. And it's called the common dandelion, but it has over the years accumulated a lot of other names. In 15th century medieval Latin, it was called the lion's tooth. And that was probably because of the shape of the leaves that you can see right in here, kind of shaped like a lion's tooth. It's also in the late Middle English, it was called cankerwort. In Kazakhstan, it's called blowball, and that's probably because children blow the seeds off the plant when it's in seed. It's also called puffball. Another name for it, and these are kind of a little bit more fun, clockflower. Legend had it that the number of breaths that it takes to blow the seeds off the dandelion globe gave you the hour of the day. Another name of it given to it was piss in bed, and that comes from an English children's myth that the dandelion makes you wet your bed. There may be some truth to this because it is a diuretic. Another name is swine snout, and that comes from probably, it's a little hard to see here, but when the plant is just about to go into seed, it's the head is called, it looks a little bit like a pig's snout. So this really creates a problem. So in 1707, there was a Swedish botanist, physician, and zoologist called Carl Linnaeus, who formalized the modern system of naming organisms called, for the plant communities, binomial nomenclature. He used Latin for these names. So the Latin name isn't even on here yet. So each plant was given two names in Latin, the first one being the genus name, and that would be Taraxacum here, and the second one being the species name. And so this is Taraxacum officinale. And the thing about giving it a Latin name is that if you go to a different country, you don't have to worry about the common name. You just deal with a Latin name. And I remember one time I was in the Alps, and I had only a book in French on plants, but the Latin names were in there, and so I could use it, even though my French was a little weak. So anyway, so there's a whole system that this falls into, and it is it's arranged like this. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, I'm on the right page. A little early. I've only had one cup of coffee this morning. So the taxonomic rate of this, here we go. Let's try this again. Of this plant is that it falls into the most general category is called the kingdom, and that's plants or animals. And then the kingdoms are broken down into divisions. And the division for this flowering plant is flowering plants. Falls into the class of dicots, and then dicots are split into orders. In this case, it's asterales. And then it's broken down into families. And this falls into the aster family. And then the genus is Taraxacum, and the species is officinale. So when you call this, when you name this plant, it's called Taraxacum officinale. Now, some botanists will split this further because some of the species are quite variable. So sometimes they'll split them into subspecies and varieties. Okay, so in Colorado, there are 143 plant families, and that's what we're going to concentrate. This is where we start our identification process. We start with the families. So there are 143 plant families in Colorado, but 75% of all the Colorado plants are found in only 19 families. And these families have, generally more than 25 species in them. Okay, so then how you go ahead and identify plants. What is this thing? Oh, three people are in the waiting room. I'm getting a message, Maggie. Three people are in the waiting room, and that message blocks my screen. Okay, so the way you identify plants is by using something called dichotomous keys. And the way the dichotomous keys works is that you get a book or a computer or whatever, and it asks you a series of, wait a minute, I'll get rid of this. There you go, now I can see it. It asks you, the key will ask you a series of questions. And in this case, it will ask you, does the plant have flowers? Geez, okay. In this case, the answer is yes, because no, if it didn't have flowers, it would fall into the ferns category. Next question is, are the leaves needle-like? And in this plant, they're not needle-like. That would take you to evergreen trees. So this comes down here, and then it asks you, a plant's parasitic? And that means, do they live off their attachment to other plants where they get their nutrients from? And in that case, they're generally not green. So this is a green plant, so it's not parasitic. And then the next question is, does it have succulent stems with spines, like cactuses? And the answer is no. And then the next question is, and that takes you down into the aster family, because you're not into cactuses, and it takes you into Taraxacum. And then when you get into Taraxacum, the question that it asks you there is, are the filaries recurved? And the answer is yes. I don't seem to be getting my whole screen here. Okay. So anyway, that's the way a dichotomous key works. And in Colorado, there are two main dichotomous keys that cover the whole flora of Colorado. One of them is Weber and Whitman, the Flora of Colorado, and that edition was published in 2012, and it's split into two books: a Western Slope, which is on the western side of the Rockies, and the Eastern Slope, which is on the eastern. And then the other major one is called Colorado Flora. And this is done by Jennifer Ackerfield. The first edition was published in 2015, and then she published another edition, which is the one that you see here, that was published in 2022. Now, one of the big things that we're going to struggle with today is, in the last 20 years, people have been looking at the genetics of plant families. Before that, and that falls into the Weber and Whitman, they didn't get into, Weber and Whitman didn't get into genetics. But they defined their families and species by plant morphology, by the shape. But the problem then, so their keys are based on morphology. They're based on shape. And in Ackerfield, she started getting into when botanists started renaming plants, because even though they looked alike morphologically, they weren't necessarily related genetically. And so many species have been put into genetically accurate families. But that means that, that sometimes, as you'll see in this, the plants that are named by Weber and Whitman might fall into a different family or a different genus, or sometimes they're even given different species names. The main book that I use today is a book written by Thomas Elpel, E-L-P-E-L, called Botany in a Day. And I use this because it describes the different plant families. It's really concentrated on plant families. And in 2004, I gave this presentation, and I used Thomas Elpel's, I think it was his 5th edition. And in that edition, the descriptions were all based on morphology, all just plant shapes. But then he ran into the same problem as Ackerfield did, and plants are starting to be moved into the new genetic groupings. And the next year I gave the course, and I saw that there was a new edition of Elpel, and a whole lot of stuff was changed. And you'll see this. We'll run through this all the way through. You're going to see some things named according to Weber and Whitman, and some others named and classified differently in Ackerfield. But the thing to remember is, they don't get hung up on that, because if you use the keys properly, the key will take you to a species, and you can then look up and see whether or not other people have given it different names, but you still go by the keys. Okay, so let's start off now on plant morphology. And basically, this is a pretty simple schematic. This is considered to be a perfect flower because it has the male and female plants on the parts on the same flower. So starting at the bottom, you have the receptacle, which is basically where the flower sits on the top of the stem. And then the next step up is our sepals. And these are leaf-like things that cover that cover the bud when the plant is in bud. They kind of look a little bit like little leaves. Then above that, you have the petals. And basically petals are just modified leaves that are designed to attract pollinators. So they're generally very colorful. And then you have the female parts, which is the pistil, considering here's the pistil, this whole section in here. And it consists of the ovary, which is the seed, basically. And then the style, which is a kind of a long neck thing, and then the stigma that sits on the top. And then the other parts are the male parts, called the stamen, which are these guys here. And they consist of a filament and an anther. And basically what happens is that the male part grows pollen, and the pollen is either transferred to the stigma by wind or by pollinators. And then the pollen grows a long tube that grows down into the ovary and fertilizes the ovary, and that's how you get the seed. The only other thing about this that you need to know is that this is a perfect flower because it has the male and female parts on it. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes on a one plant, some flowers will have only male flowers. Some flowers will have only female flowers, which would only have, the parts separately. And then sometimes these occur on different plants. So you'll have a plant with just male flowers on it and a plant with just female flowers on it. The other thing, the only other thing to note in this is that this is considered to be there's a word that you use called superior or inferior ovaries. Here's the ovary here. And in this flower, the ovary is considered to be superior because it occurs above the sepals and the petals. And you'll see later on in here, we'll talk about plants that have inferior ovaries, which means that the ovary would sit underneath the sepals, which would come out here, and the petals, which would come out above, so that the ovary would sit below. Okay, the next thing that's used in plant morphology is leaf phyllotaxy. And this is basically how the leaves are arranged on the stem. And this is another way, another characteristic that you use to identify plants. And they basically fall into these categories. That the leaves are alternate, which means that they come out of each side of the stem on an alternate basis. Or they come out opposite, which means that a leaf comes out of each side of the stem from the same point. And then sometimes they're spiral, and sometimes they're whorled, which means that there are three leaves will come out of the same point in the stem. Okay, so now what I want to do is to introduce the 10 of the most common wildflower families in Colorado from Botany in a Day. And we'll start with the mustard family. Now, in this page comes from Elpel, and it basically gives you all of the characteristics of the mustard family. And it always gives you what's known as keywords. Let me see if I can. Oh, no. I got a thing here which is covering the bottom, and I can't word. Anyway, keywords are 4 petals. See, I can't see the keywords. Maggie.
Yes.
Oh, I know what I'm talking about.
We can see the keywords at the bottom down there.
Yeah, you can, but I can't.
It just says 4 petals and
I'm
6
gonna move
stamens.
this. I've got this strip that doesn't disappear. Let me see. How do I make it disappear?
Oh, so where it says more on the right end of that strip, you
Yeah.
say hide meeting controls, and then the whole toolbar goes away.
Boink. Didn't work. Hide floating meeting controls.
Yes, those.
There. Oh, outstanding. I don't know how to get them back, but I won't worry about that now. Okay. So the key words here are 4 petals and 6 stamens, 4 tall and 2 short. And what that means is the flower has 4 petals, which you can see here. And it has 6 stamens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, these are the male parts. 4 tall and 2 short. And then the seed pods are when the flowers change to seeds, they are create a radial pattern around the stem. You know, they come out and all around the stem. And the other thing that the other way that and the seeds are in pods, the pods are one of the major ways that you identify individual species. And you can see there are a whole lot of different pod kinds. And in the key, it says, you know, are the pods long and thin, which are like these, or are they you know, almost oval, which are like these. So let's take a look at some mustards. The first one is heart-leaved bittercrest, cardamine cordifolia. Cordifolia means heart-shaped leaf, and that you can see it just a little bit here. It's kind of heart-shaped at the bottom. This grows in wet areas on montane and subalpine. I took this photo in Western Pass. Another mustard is shepherd's purse, Capsella bursipastoris. And you can see it was named shepherd's purse because evidently this looks a little bit like a shepherd's purse. I've never seen one myself, but I believe what they say. This is a non-native plant. It was introduced by Europeans for medicinal purposes. When they came over, they brought a lot of their plants. Interesting to know that introduced plants represent 18% of our flora. Some people say, well, don't even bother with non-native plants, you know, but you can't just not do that because they're a big part of our flora. A lot of them are quite beautiful. Some of them are not so wonderful, but so that's shepherd's purse. And then this one is tansy mustard, Descarania sophia. And you will see this one is, I think I've seen in bloom already this year. The nice thing about mustards is that the fruits and the flowers occur on the plants at the same time. What happens is that they bloom from the bottom up the stem, so that if you look below the flowers, you generally see the fruits. And that's really great because fruits are a major way that you identify mustards. Okay, now before going to the next family, which is the pea family, I need to talk to you about regular and irregular flowers. Regular flowers have a radial symmetry, which means that if you cut the flower along one line here, you're going to get a mirror image of it on the other side of that cut. And you could do it multiple ways. In irregular flowers, they can only be cut one way. And you get a mirror image on each. And this is one of the major features that you use to identify different plants, whether the flower is regular or irregular. So when we get into the pea family, the key words are banner wings and keel, pea-like pods, often with pinnate leaves. So this is an irregular flower because you can only cut it in one direction. If you cut it in another direction, then you don't get a mirror image. And the flower always comes with a banner, which are these big petals up on the top here, and then little wings that are in the bottom underneath, and then a keel that sits between the two wings, and that's banner, wings, and keel. And then the pea-like pods are pea-like pods. Now this family is very complicated, and so Alpha, what he does it's complicated, and it has a wide variance in form. So in this family, Alpha cuts the family down into subfamilies and tribes. So if you look at on this slide, both of these peas, alfalfa, Medicago sativa, and the locust, are in the pea subfamily, because there are multiple subfamilies. But alfalfa falls into the clover tribe because it has something called trifoliate leaves, which are these little leaves with 3 leaflets on them. And the locust has what's known as pinnate leaves, which are leaves that have leaves on each side of the stem. So one thing to note is that in Weber and Whitman and Ackerfield, none of them break this down into tribe. They don't do the tribes and subfamilies, but they do break them down into by keys. But I talked about the different leaf forms, so let's take a look at the different leaf forms, because this is important. And the thing that I want to talk about here is the difference between simple and compound leaves, because these are, this little guy here and this little guy here are considered to be compound leaves. So what's the difference between a compound leaf and a simple leaf? Well, it depends on where the leaf falls off from the stem in the fall. And a simple leaf, the leaf will break off from the stem right at the base of this single leaf. But let's talk about the ternate or trifolium, which was the one that we looked at just previously. This leaf breaks off from the stem here rather than here, up here. So these little guys are not considered leaves, they're considered leaflets. So each one of these will break off at the bottom. And you can see there are a whole lot of different kinds of compound leaves. They're, trifoliate, double trifoliate or ternate, palmate, which means that the leaflets come from the top of the stem, as if it was you were looking at your palm. And you can see there are a whole lot of different kinds of compound leaves, but that's the difference between it's where it breaks off from the stem. So let's take a look at some peas. This guy is called narrow-leaf bird's foot trefoil. This is one of these names, one of the things that you're going to see, like in Ackerfield. She named this plant same that William Weber and Whitman did. It was used to be called Lotus glaber. But in the new book, she calls it Lotus tenuis. Don't know why she changed the name. There was probably some botanist that did, a great study on this and found that it fit tenuis better than glaber, and so they renamed it glaber, tenuis. Another one is Parry's crazy weed, Oxytropis parryi. In this case, the species name is named after the fellow who first identified it, Parry, Oxytropis parryi. And species names, sometimes they are sometimes the species name, which is the second name, is descriptive, and sometimes it's just named after the the botanist that discovered it. In this case, it's Parrii. This plant is called crazy weed because it's very poisonous to livestock, and evidently when they drink it, I mean, when they eat it, they go crazy, and you know and they die. It's very poisonous. Okay, so let's just stop and for a minute and see if you have any questions that need to be answered.
Mo, there was one question about you kind of got there with the difference between a leaf and a leaflet.
Yeah.
Um, but can you also like use the words pedicel, petiole, describe those words? Like the stem of the that goes from the branch to the leaf is the petiole, but the little stem on a flower is called the pedicel. This is one thing that always I forget. But then what is the stem between the main leaf and the leaflet, the little leaflet stems? What is that called?
This one here in a simple, it's a petiole.
But like in a pinnate leaf, if there's a little stem between the main stem and the leaf, does that have a special name?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that I'm not sure.
Okay. Just wondering, sorry. And then someone asked, what is the difference between pinnate and palmate?
Okay, pinnate means, here's a pinnate here. And it just means that the leaflets come out of I guess it's the petiole. Leaflets come out of the petiole from see, like what, like trying to, well, they come out on each side, and that's pinnate. And palmate means that there are 3 or more leaflets that come out of the tip of the petiole. So this comes out on either side, and these come out all from the tip. And there could be 3 of these, or there could be 5, or we'll see some actually, some good examples of palmate leaves. Okay, are there any other questions?
Yes, in keys to families diagram, what does Filary's recurved mean?
I didn't quite get that question. What'd you say?
Sure, so when you're referencing the recurved Filaries, I think it was on the
Oh
dandelion.
yeah, that was, I realized. Yeah, that's that's incorrect. It's not, it weren't filaries. Or that the question should have been, I can't believe I've done this so many times and I never noticed that error. But when you get down into Taraxacum, in order to get to officinale, they want to know whether or not the leaf, the lobes of the leaf are recurved. So here is a leaf, and there's the bottom of that leaf is down here, and this little lobe of the leaf is curved back down the stem, and that's called recurved. And in Taraxacum officinale, that's how you tell that species from all of the other Taraxacum species in Colorado. Is this little lobe will usually just, go out laterally or go point up the stem rather than down the stem. So that's what recurved means. that clear?
Yes, thank you. And also just on that point, I think that's a reference in asters, like for the bracts, if the bracts come back around and point down towards the ground, then that is a key in a lot of our asters.
Yes, right. And that's all recurved. Okay, are we good?
Hold on one sec. Yes, we are, although we're still wondering what the name of the stem that goes to the leaflet is. And I'm still looking that up, people. I'll put it in the chat. Oh, it's called Matthew says the petiole.
Petiole?
Yes, Petiole. Thank you, Matthew.
Well, now I learned something today. I've never heard that word, but okay. All right, so let's get on to the next family, which you're probably familiar with, and that's the rose family. This is also a very complicated family. It has 73 species in it in Colorado. And those species are split into 5 subfamilies, but I'm not going to get into the subfamilies just to keep things a little more simple. Okay, so the key words for the rose family are 5 sepals, 5 petals with usually numerous stamens and oval serrated leaves. Okay, so in the rose family, I hate to tell you this, but whenever you see usually put in front of something, it means that it doesn't always occur that way. So in the rose family plants usually has 5 petals. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But sometimes they have as few as 3, and sometimes as many as 10. And the same thing is true of the sepals. Can you see them under there? Here, the sepals are in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're have usually 5, but sometimes 3 and or 10. But you'll see, you'll get kind of a gestalt of the plant in spite of the fact that they vary a bit. And then usually numerous stamens, which you can see lots and lots of stamens here, and numerous pistils. There is one genus that has only 1 pistil in the rose family, and that is Prunus. And then they have oval serrated leaves. Now the ones here's a perfect example of the pinnate and palmate leaves. Here, this is a whole leaf here, and these are the leaflets off of it. And then here's a palmate leaf with leaflets that all come out of the same point on the tip of the petiole. Oh, what was it? The petiole? I'll call it the petiole anyway. So, so let's take a look at some roses. This little guy up here is called mountain dryad, Dryas hookeriana. It used to be called Hookerus octopetala, which meant 8 petals, but it's been changed in Acrofield. But you can see multiple petals there. You can't see the sepals underneath it, multiple sepals, but many stamens and many petals, and that's a pretty classic rose. Um, um, okay, and then the prairie rose is what I would call a classic rose. I'm trying to see something here. I can't see it. Okay. And this is Rosa arkansana. See, it's now in the rose subfamily. This dryad is in something called the dryad subfamily in Acrofield too. But this is in the rose subfamily, and this is a real classic rose because it has 5 sepals, which you can't really see. These are sepals here, but you can't really count 5 of them, but there are 5 of them, 5 petals. Multiple stamens, which you can see up in here, and multiple pistils. And this one has pinnate compound leaves, which are, oh, you can see them a little bit here. And then wild plum, Prunus americana, this is in the almond subfamily. And the almond subfamily is described by Ackerfield as having, they're usually shrubs with foamy looking flowers, dense clusters of small, usually white or pink flowers, and dangling stamens. You can see these stamens are sticking way out. But this has 5 sepals and 5 petals like the others, and 15 to 30 stamens, but only 1 pistil. But you could see they're in spite of the fact that they have different number of pistils and stuff, there's a certain similarity to how all of these species look. But let me get into the problem that we've been facing here. And the problem is that we are basically trying to take plants and put them into discrete silos so that, there's no overlap between any different species. And the problem with that is that that's not the way the world works. The world works, we have natural selection, Darwin's natural selection, where plants evolve slowly over time. They don't just jump from one species to another. So in order to show you this, if you take let's say a group of plants that are growing, let's say on the south side of a mountain 10,000 years ago, even within those plants, there's going to be a certain amount of variability. There are going to be character differences, and that's represented here by the thickness of this line. There's a certain amount of species variability. So let's say the plants, some of their seeds get blown to the other side of the mountain. Rather than being hot and sunny, it's cool and damp. And so over a period of time, these species, these 2 groups of plants, over a period of time, they're going to react to their environment, and they're going to become, have more and more different characteristics. So over a period of time, they get to the point where they look a whole lot different. And we as humans say, well, I know they're originally the same species, but I can't stand it anymore. We've got to split them because they don't look alike anymore. And so we split them into different species. And so we're basically trying to fit a round pole into a square hole. Just isn't exact. And if there's anything that you'll realize today is that it isn't exact, but we just need to categorize stuff, so we do it anyway. So what happens if we get to here and these species can interbreed? Well, we just say, well, what the heck, we'll just call that a hybrid. And so that's what we do. So this leads us into the next family, which is a mess, and it's always been a mess. It's the figwort family, and this family has always been very difficult because basically it was in the old morphological families, which is called Scrophulariaceae. They just put a whole lot of flowers that didn't necessarily look alike, but they had they were irregular flowers, and with 5 stamens in them. And so in the original figwort subfamily, all of these genera were put in there. Now, what happened is that they started to look, even though these flowers didn't look very alike, and you'll see that shortly. They moved them into different families because genetics implied that. So pedicularis and Castelligia, for instance, were put into the broom rape family because they found that these genera were slightly parasitic. And then Veronica and Penstemon were put into the plantain family. And then Mimulus was put into the lopseed family. And that's because genetics said that they were more like the plants in those families than they were in the old figwort subfamily. So this creates a real problem for Elphill because he wants them to be in families that they look alike, but they don't look alike at all. So Penstemon is put into the plantain family, and in order to do that, he creates a new tribe within the plantain family, and just sticks Penstemon into that. And describes it differently than the other plants and the other tribes in that family. And in the turtlehead family, the plantain family, he basically describes the plantain as a classic figwort-like flower, even though it shows up in a family that doesn't look like it at all. I asked Jennifer Ackerfield, well, when they move plants from one family into another, how do you handle that during in your keys? And she said, there's always a way to separate plant species in keys, in spite of the fact that you're putting them into weird families. So that was basically the way she did that, and I'll show you in a minute how she does that in this case. So the movement of figworts, the old figworts, into the new different families with special subfamily categories is so chaotic that I'm going to describe the figworts in using the old family morphological families, these guys over here, these 3, figwort, mullein, and rattleweed. So let's start with figwort family. In the figwort family, the original one, there were 92 species. This is described as a classic figwort-like flower. In the original figwort family, there were 3 subfamilies. In the figwort family, flowers are irregular, which means that you can only cut them one way, with 3 lobes of the flower petals down and 2 lobes up. Keywords: irregular flowers with 3 lobes down and 2 lobes up. 4 or 5 united sepals. Here are your sepals here, and they're united because they're not cut all the way to the base. So they're united here, and then you see the top of the sepal here. 4 or 5 united petals, and so you can see the petals also are not cut all the way to the bottom. They're united in this area here. 4 or 5 united sepals and 4 or 5 stamens. And in this subfamily, one of the stamens is small, which is this guy up here. So there are 4 stamens, and one of them is small. And this is called the classic figwort family, and it's penstemons. And so here are some examples. Wait a minute, this thing is back again. Show video panel high. There we go. This is penstemon chyspetosis. Took this up in Salt Creek in South Park. And it's a little hard to see the 3 down and the 2 up on this one. But on this one, Penstemon debilis, which is on Mount Callahan, is a rare plant, has 3 lobes down and 2 lobes up. And then Penstemon whippolanus, you can see the 3 lobes down, 3 lobes up. The united, can you see? Well, united sepals are way down in here, united petals. So these guys originally were in Scrophulariaceae family, but they've been moved to the plantain family, Plantaginaceae. And in this case, Ackerfield, the key separates these really easily, even though the penstemon doesn't look anything like a plantain. She's in the key, she asks the question, are the leaves opposite? In this case, they are opposite because this is a penstemon, or are they an alternate or a basal rosette? The basal rosette is just a bunch of leaves that come out of the base of the plant and don't climb up the stem. If they are a basal rosette or alternate, they are basically the classic plantain plant. But if they're opposite, then they fall into this subfamily in the plantain family. So he creates a new turtlehead tribe, and he just describes the turtlehead tribe in the plantain family as a classic figwort-like flower with well-defined lobes, 2 up and 3 down. Okay, so going back into the original Scrophulariaceae family, the second figwort family was the rattleweed subfamily. And you're looking at the plants that were in that original grouping, and you can see they don't look anything alike. So this even originally, this was kind of a dumping ground for irregular flowers. So in this rattleweed family, rattleweed subfamily of Scrophulariaceae, You have Castelligia, Pedicularis, and Veronica. The key words had 2 to 4 stamens and no 5th stamen. Remember that the 5th one in the previous family was smaller than the other 4. But you can see these look really, really different. In Castelligia, the actual flower is not this big thing here. These are great big colorful bracts. The flowers are these little guys in here. Those are actually the flowers. And if you pull them out and look at them, and they're pretty hard to see, you would find that there are 4 stamens, and the upper lip of the flower is hooded, which is this little piece up in here. In Pedicularis, which is this guy here, the upper, it has 4 stamens, and the upper lip is hooded, and the lower lip is 3 lobes, which you can see 1, 2, 3. But in Veronica, there are only 2 stamens, 1, 2, and the calyx has 4 lobes. So these don't, this has always been a mishmash. And when they were moved into the new families, it was a mishmash. But the thing about these flowers is that they are so unique. Once you see a Castelligia, you're going to say, that's a Castelligia. The lousewort is pretty much the same thing. Once you see them, you're going to say, yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so this was the second subfamily, and then the third subfamily was the mullen subfamily. This damn thing keeps coming back. I floated. Well, oh, what happened? Okay. In the mullen subfamily, common mullen, verbascum thapsus. In this subfamily of the original grouping, the plants had 5 equal stamens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, the other one had 4, and one of them was small. And this plant stayed in the figwort family. Well, I hope I haven't confused everybody completely, but I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. The Scrophulariaceae family was always horrible, and it's still horrible. But again, say it again, all you do is you go to the keys, and the key will take you down to the species just by looking at the different shapes. They may end up, if in one book, they may end up in a different family than another book, but you'll get down to pretty much the same species. Okay, so now let's go to one that's really easy in comparison. This is the carrot or the parsley family, Apiaceae. There are 41 species, and the keywords are compound umbel and usually hollow flower stalks. So what's a compound umbel? An umbel occurs when the flowers all come out of the tip of the stem. Now, a compound umbel here's the tip of the stem, and then there are little, I don't know what they're called. I will call them stemlets that come out of the top. And then if you look at this little grouping here, it's also an umbel. So you have one umbel, and then at the end of each one of these things is another umbel. And that is the carrot or parsley family. And that's a classic shape. To my knowledge, into Colorado, there isn't any other flower that occurs that way. If you wanted to look at the flowers are tiny with 5 sepals, 5 petals, and 5 stamens. They have an inferior ovary, and you can see that, actually, you can see that in here. Here are your 5 stamens and then 5 petals, and then the ovary sits underneath the flowers and petals, so it has an inferior ovary. And if you look at a seed, you'll see that, the remnants of the sepals and petals at the top. So this is a inferior ovary, and it usually has hollow flower stalks. Many of the species in this family are poisonous, but it's a neat one because it's pretty easy to see. This one here is wild parsnip, Pastanaca sativa. It's a non-native, and don't touch it because the sap causes skin burns. But you can see very clearly here the compound umbel. There's one umbel comes out of the top of that stem, and then there's another umbel that occurs here, and then the flowers are on that double umbel. And then, so that's one way you'll see it with a loose compound umbel. And then there are a lot of them that have really dense compound umbels like this. But again, they're pretty easy to identify. This guy here, Oreopsis humilis, is a globally rare plant, which is one of Colorado's endemic plants. Only occurs on Pikes Peak, although people think they might have seen him on a couple of nearby peaks. But that's the parsley family, and that's a nice, easy one. Next one is the goosefoot family. Goosefoot family, Chenopodiaceae, has 45 species in Colorado. A lot of our food species come from the goosefoot family: beets, chard, and spinach. And the key words here are weedy plants with, I love this, globby or pokey flowers found in disturbed or alkaline soils. So anyway, in this family, the flowers are not, they don't look like flowers. If you look at them really closely using a lens, the flowers have 2 to 5, usually 5 sepals, often united, no petals, an equal number of stamens as sepals, and a superior ovary with 2 or rarely 3 to 5 united carpels forming a single chamber. You don't generally look at that, look at these plants that closely, and you'll see, if you look here, 5 sepals united at the base or completely fused, no petals, only sepals, and then ovary is superior. So the ovary sits above the sepals. But let's take a look at these, because you'll see that you don't really look, you have to look at the flowers in details. This guy here is shad scale saltbrush, a triplex confervolia. This is only found in the western counties. And you can see, because I've blown it up here, I guess I blew up this little piece here. these are the flowers. And they do look globby. I don't know what pokey means, but they do look globby because they don't really look like flowers at all. And in this one, spiny hopsage, Grayana spinosa, this is also in the far west counties, and this is what the flower looks like here. In the goosefoot family, apple has 5 subfamilies, 6 subfamilies. But he doesn't describe what the differences are of each, so that's not very useful. But that's what they look like. They just you can see that where they're sitting in the plant, they're sort of as where a flower should be, but they don't look that much like them. Let's go to one that we probably know better, and it's the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae. There are 42 species. And the keywords are they have 3 to multiple simple pistils at the center of the flower, which are in here, and you can see there's a pistil. In other families that you usually have 1 pistil, but there are 3. All parts of the flower, the petals, the sepals, the stamens, and the pistils are separate. They're not united in one another. They're not fused. And the tips of the pistils are hooked. Most species of this family are poisonous. I tried to get a photo of a hook on the pistil, and I have not been able to find one. I guess they're pretty small. Ranunculaceae looks quite a lot like the rose family, but in the rose family, the leaves are oval or serrated. And there are also, in the rose family, you'll find in the classic rose family, you'll find something called a stipule, which is a leaf-like bract, which is appears under at the branch where the branches come in, and the receptacle is domed. The receptacle will be down here. This is a rose, so the receptacle is not domed. So here are some buttercups. Globe flower, Crurus albiflorus, grows in wet meadows and springs. This is clearly a regular flower. But the interesting thing about the buttercup family is they have regular flowers and irregular flowers. This is an irregular because it can only be cut one way. This is a Colorado blue columbine, Aquilegia corollaria. The name Aquilegia comes from the Latin aquila, which means eagle, and probably refers to the spurred petals. These petals have got big spurs on the backs of them. Interestingly, in spite of the fact that the buttercup family has a bunch of plants that have regular flowers and a bunch of plants that have irregular flowers, they're not split into subfamilies. I've never quite understood why that's true, but they're not. Okay, the next one is the evening primrose family, Anagraceae. There are 42 species. The key words are flower parts, usually in 4s, 4 sepals, 4 petals, rarely 2, 3, or 5 of each. You're going to run into that occasionally. 4 to 8 stamens. equal to or twice as many stamens as petals, an inferior ovary. So the petals and the stamens come out here and the ovary is underneath. But the thing that really is classic is a four-parted stigma. Stigma comes out and it has like four little different separate parts on it. Some evening primroses, fireweed, Chimerium angustifolium. This actually is a species that's found, it grows in Colorado, but also grows in Maine, where I have a little house in Frenchman's Bay, and this same species grows there. And this is photo was taken there, but you can see very clearly the four-parted stamen here. And the same thing is true of tufted evening primrose. You got four stamens here. It's hard to see the fourth one. It's probably hidden behind there. Okay, the next family is the borage family, Boraginaceae, with 39 species. Whoop. The patterns of the borage family are 5 united petals. So here are the petals here, and they're united. They're not cut all the way to the base. And the stamens are attached to the inside of the petals. They don't go all the way down to the receptacle. They're attached to the petal itself. 5 separate sepals. So you have separate sepals, and you have united petals. And then the fruit ends up being little nutlets. We'll show you some nutlets in a minute. So let's take a look at some borages. Hortensia, sagebrush, bluebells, Hortensia foliosa. This is one of them. In Weber and Whitman, in the Weber and Whitman key, and the Ackerfield first edition key, Hortensia had 9 species, and it was pretty easy to separate them out. But for some reason, Ackerfield, in her second book that she wrote, which just came out, she splits it into 22 species. And the key is a bear. It's terrible. I would recommend if you get to Hortensia, that I either use Weber and Whitman or Ackerfield in her first edition, because her second edition is really tough. I think some guy did a big study and felt that it had to be split into a bunch of more species, and so she went with that because that's supposed to be the latest and greatest. In Hortensia, in the key that Ackerfield and Weber and Whitman use, one of the ways that you identify the different species is where the stamens attach to the petals, whether they attach right at the throat where the petals open up, or whether they attach way down in the throat down in here. So it can be tough to identify. Some more borages. This is called miner's candle. In miner's candle and in these Oricara, notice the little yellow, little yellow eye in these flowers. They're called cat eye. And that's a pretty easy way of identifying at least the genus. Now the species is very tough to identify because you have to take a look at the nutlets, and it's sometimes very hard to find the nutlets. You know, that whether or not they have, you know, their shape and what their skins look like and so forth. And this is the size of them. These are salt grains and those are nutlets. Okay, so the last family is the one of the most complicated in Colorado. It's the Asteraceae family, the aster family. There are 378 species. The family is pretty easy to identify because it has what's known as composite flowers, disc and ray flowers. So if you look at, let's say you look at this whole flower here, that's not one flower. That is a whole lot of flowers. Each one of the little things in the disc is a flower, which looks like this. And then each one of these, which are called ray flowers, they have a flower attached to that, so that that looks like one flower is actually, I don't know if it's 100, but could be 100 or something like that. If you look at a typical disc flower, these are what they call pretty advanced flowers, and they are constructed with an inferior ovary. Here's the ovary down here. And then above that are the sepals, which are these guys here, but they're so highly modified. They're called pappus hairs. And then 5 petals, these are the petals up here, which are fused together. And then the stamens that are fused together around the pistil. There are the stamens, and there's the pixels up here. And then these flowers also have multiple layers of bracts underneath. If you look underneath this flower, you'll see very often multiple layers of bracts, and those bracts are also used as a characteristics to identify them. Different species. Elfel describes 13 tribes of sunflowers. But the problem with his treatment is he doesn't tell you how they're different. So it's not as useful as it should be. So in order to deal with that, I decided that I would go leave Elfel and take you into Ackerfield's key and show you how she splits it down in her key, because that's probably what you're going to use anyway, and so it's good practice. So in order to deal with the complexity of the aster family, Ackerfield splits. She splits the key. The first key splits all of the species into 6 sub-keys. And we'll go through each one of those sub-keys so that you can see how she does it. Then once she gets you down into one of those 6 groupings, she uses a second set of keys to take you to the genus, and then a third set of keys from the genus to take you to the species. That's the only way that you can really do it when you have, so you split it into 6, and then you split it into genera, and then you split it into species. And, other families do the same thing, but in this one, it's really the most noticeable. So let's take a look at the first. So in order to get you down into one of the 6 groupings, you go into key 1. In this group, plants have ray flowers only. Remember, these are the ray flowers. These are the disc flowers. They have ray flowers only, usually perfect, which means that, the male and female are on the same plant, with 5 terminal teeth and milky or colored sap. And our common dandelion falls into this group. They're only ray flowers. And if I'm sure that you've broken it off and seen the milky sap. And then this is called the prairie false dandelion, Northocallis cuspidata. And you can see it's only ray flowers. Okay, now I have to take you do a little more technical stuff to get you into the key 2 through 6. And I have to discuss pappus. Remember, the pappus was here. These are modified sepals. So here they are. And in order to split these, the following groupings, you have to take a look at the pappus. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to take you through this key, because you have to be able to identify different groups of pappuses, whatever. What she does is she breaks the species down depending on what kind of pappus they have. And there are 2 groupings of pappus. One of them is capillary. And these are capillary pappuses. These are basically pappuses with long hair, clear hair-like things that come out here. And there are 3 different kinds. One of them is capillary. This is capillary, where you just have straight hairs. Barblet, which are hairs with little barbs on it. And then plumose pappus, which is, they look like little feathers rather than single hairs. So this is one group of filaries that she's going to split species into. And then the other types are all the others, which are either fringe scales, low scales, barbed awns, or no pappus at all. So you have one group is capillary, and then the other one is everything else. Scales, crown, barbed awns, or no pappus. Okay, so just keep this in mind now. So now we go into the key 2, which is described as plants with only disc flowers, but only disc flowers with capillary or plumose pappus. Only disc flowers. Remember, this guy here is ray flowers. This guy here is just disc flowers. But disc flowers with capillary or plumose pappus. Okay. And here are a couple of examples. Heads with only disc flowers or inconspicuous rays. Pappus, capillary, or plumose. And fish lake thistle, which is Cirsium glyceum, used to be clavatum, but it's been changed to glycetum. This guy here, you can't tell from the photos, but it has a plumose pappus. And then few flowered Pacra pauciflora. And Ackerfield in her second book said that this is misidentified as Pacra debilis, but I don't know why. I shouldn't have even told you that. It's considered to be rare and endangered in Colorado. But this one has capillary pappus. This guy had the plumose, remember the ones that were like feathers, and this one has just the capillary. Okay, so key 3 are plants with only disc flowers, so we're still in an only disc flower group, or inconspicuous rays, with a pappus of scales, awns, short crown bristles, or absent. So that's that second group of everything else that isn't capillary. This guy here is Grindelia inornata, and he has an awned pappus. And pasture sage Artemisia frigida doesn't have any pappus at all. So that's key 3. And then key 4 are plants with ray and disc flowers, but the rays and disc flowers, but the rays are white, blue, purple, or pink. And so here we have tansy leaf Macaranthera tenactifolia, ray flowers, disc flowers, purple, ray flowers, disc flowers, white, Lori Townsend, Daisy, Townsendia, and Canna. The 5th key are plants with ray and disc flowers, but rays are yellow or orange, and there's so many of these, and these are the ones that everybody complains about. Oh my God, those yellow asters. But it helps if you know your papacy. These have ray and disc flowers, yellow or orange, pappus of capillary or barblet. Heartleaf arnica is an example of this. It has a barblet pappus. And then dwarf goldenreed, Solidago simplex, has a capillary pappus. And then the last key 6, plants with ray or disc flowers, rays yellow or orange, and the pappus are awns, scales, short crown, or absent. This is the second grouping of all the others that aren't capillary. And an example of that is golden tick seed, which it doesn't have a pappus at all. And then mule's ears, Wyathia and plexicolis, has pappus of a crown. And so those are the 6. Then once you get into this grouping, you get into key 6, then the next key down is going to take you to the individual genera that go into this grouping, and then you're going to go from the genera down to the species. So questions and a 15-minute break.
Thanks, Mo. Great picture. Who's that?
That's Chester, my golden retriever.
He looks adorable. We had some vocabulary questions, but I addressed them in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah, just thinking about the words that you're using. And I did put the Mertensia key in there too. Just took a picture of it. And it is really interesting. I never looked at that. And there are no current, it would help if they created a bunch more species. if there was occurrence maps, but that's the one thing in here that doesn't have an occurrence map apparently. So good luck with that.
Yeah, occasionally there aren't occurrence maps. I don't know. I don't know why that happens. Well, I
Well,
know
that
there was.
particular one, she said she had just recently referenced the key, just as you said, from another author. And so she had not yet visited all the herbarium specimens. So
Oh,
she said, I just couldn't make the maps. She wrote that in the book.
but it turned out that about 25% of the plants that are out here are also found in New England. So I've gotten to be really interested in what plants you find here and that you find also in New England. And so you'll see that as when we get into this, I'll talk about that a little bit, some examples. In this section, we're going to add a bunch of new families, 14 of them, but I'm only going to give you the keywords. We're not going to go into any much more detail than that. But I would suggest don't try to remember, memorize all the keywords of the families. Just use the keys and to identify plants. I'm going to try to get rid of this thing again. Hi, for me. Oop, oop. So I'm just gonna give you the keywords and kind of point out the characteristics on the screen. And you'll also find in this section also that lots of families have been changed from Weber and Whitman using morphological characteristics to Ackerfield using genetic stuff. So what I want to do is to just take you on a little couple of hikes around Colorado. First group will be some trails that I've identified in some of our key major cities where a lot of you might be, with a couple of different plants in each, ones that you're likely to see when you go out there. And then I want to take you into our different Colorado life zones. One of the main reasons that we have such a variety of flora in Colorado is that we have a lot of different altitude, starting starting in the plains out in Yuma County, which is out in here. Our lowest point of altitude is 3,315 feet, where the Arickaree River goes into Kansas in Yuma County. And then the up to the highest point, which is Mount Elbert, which is, I think, is somewhere here in Lake County, 12 miles southwest of Leadville. And that's 14,433 feet. And so we have a lot of different life zones. We've got the plains, which are out here, which are basically up to 6,000 feet. And on the west slope, we've got we have semi-desert shrublands, which is the same altitude, but a very different flora because the moisture regime is really different primarily. Moisture comes at a different time of year. So we have the plains, and then we have the foothills, which is the light green, and the montane, which runs from 8,000 to 10,000 feet, which is the dark green. Subalpine, 10,000 feet, which is the blue, and then the alpine, which is the white. And so let's go on a little walk. And today is the day that I normally do it. I walk the Highline Canal usually on the weekends. Highline Canal is located in Denver, and it runs all the way from Chatfield, way out in the foothills, 75 miles out into Aurora. And there are, in spite of the fact, in spite of the fact that it runs right through the middle of Denver, there are plenty of beautiful flowers to see along here. The Denver Botanic Gardens did an inventory about 3 or 4 years ago, inventory of plants, and they found over 450 species of different plants. They're pretty cool. The section that I walk is this section right in here, between Yale Avenue and Holly, between Eisenhower and Bible Parks, and I've identified 75 different species. Quite a few of them are exotic plants. Some of them are plants that have escaped from people's gardens. But there are some pretty neat native plants that are here, and I'll show you a couple. This guy is showy milkweed, Asclepias speciosa. It's a very cool plant. This is the milkweed. It's native. It blooms in July on the Highline Canal, and it's Colorado's most abundant milkweed. It grows on roadsides, fence rows, fields, on the eastern and western slopes, from the plains to the lower montane up to 8,600 feet. Very toxic. But it's a neat plant. And this is in a new family called the dogbane family, Apocynaceae, which has 24 species. It's one of several subfamilies in that dogbane family. It's the milkweed family. And the key words are opposite leaves, which you can, it's a little hard to tell that these are opposite, but they are opposite. I guess you have to just take my word for it. Milky juice, big pods. This is the pod full of seeds, which you're probably familiar with. And irregular crown-like flowers. And these, it is a pretty unusual flower. Another species that I see along here is yellow salsify. It's my second cup of coffee. Tragopogon dubius. It grows along roadsides and in fields. And this one really fooled me when I first tried to key it, because I looked at it and I said, okay, this is a yellow flower. Here is the strap flower. Here are the disc flowers. And I keyed it and keyed it and keyed it, and I couldn't get it. And then what I did is I pulled off one of the strap flowers, and one of these things that looked like a disc flower was the actual flower that went with that strap. So it was a strap only, which is Ackerfield's key 1, ray flowers with milky sap. But it's a neat plant. It's not non-native, but it's very pretty. And look at the bud. The size of the bud on it is enormous. Very cool. And that's not gonna be out yet, I don't think. So those are a couple of plants from there. I thought that I'd try to identify a trail up in Fort Collins, the Poudre River Trail, which I identified. I don't think I've ever walked any part of this. It's a 10-foot wide, 21-mile long trail along the Cache La Poudre River. And it goes from River Bluffs open space in Fort Collins, which is way over here, to Island Grove Regional Park in Greeley, 21 miles long. Its primary goal was recreation, but much of the trail is in semi-natural state because it runs along the river floodplain. And so you see some really neat native flowers along here. This guy, Oregon grape, has spiny leaves. And it's in a new family called the barberry family, which has only 4 species. The key words in this family is it's a dicot plant. Oh, in the first section, I never talked about the difference between dicot plants and monocot plants. That's one of the distinctions that is something that you ought to know about. Unfortunately, no, I don't need an illustration. There, the above the family in the taxonomy in the key, there's a section that splits dicot plants from monocot plants. And in a dicot plant, if you've done any gardening or get out in the early spring, when a plant first comes out, it either will have one leaf or it'll have two leaves. They're called cotyledons. They're not real leaves, but it's the first one. And the one with one leaf is called monocot plants, and dicot plants have two leaves. And the dicot plants, their flower parts are in twos or fours. And monocot plants, the flower parts are in threes or sixes, odd. And also the leaves on monocot plants, the what am I thinking like the what's the word I'm trying to think of? The veins on the leaves start from the bottom of the leaf and then go all the way to the top. On dicot leaves, they're like a tree, they go up and they branch. And so, monocots and dicots, and we'll talk about this a fair amount later in some of the other plant families, is one of the ways that you tell the difference before you even get into family, whether it's a monocot or dicot. But this plant is a dicot plant. But its flower parts are in threes, which is really unusual because they're usually split really evenly between dicots and monocots. They're either the flower parts are either twos or fours or threes or sixes. But in this one, it's a dicot plant with flower parts in threes, often with multiple layers. And you can see actually the leaves here the veins come out of the mid vein, like little trees, but the floral parts are in threes, and it has multiple layers of sepals and petals. So that's one of the ones that you see. You see this. This is a pretty common plant in Colorado. Another plant that you'll see along here is in the rose family. Remember, 5 sepals, 5 petals, numerous stamens, and oval serrated leaves. This is one of these examples. It probably goes into a subfamily where the leaves aren't oval and serrated. Actually, I don't think this is a compound leaf. I think these are just different lobes on a simple leaf. A little hard to tell. Nope, it's compound. Because you got leaflet here, and then a leaflet, complex leaflet at the top. It's compound leaves with 2 or more leaflets. The fruit is a dry oval seed with little hooks on it. You can see that if this is getting towards that. And it's said that the root of a European subspecies of yellow avens was formerly used to protect one's house from the devil. I don't know what you did with it. You probably hung it on the door or something like that. This guy's found along streams and in moist meadows, but sometimes in dry spruce pine forests on eastern and western slopes from the plains to the montane. Now, that's a couple of plants there. We zip down to Colorado Springs. We get to Red Rock Canyon Park. It's a 1,474 acre city park run by Colorado Springs Park and Recreation. Has 11 marked trails and a series of these red hogbacks, same as the Garden of the Gods. And here you find winged buckwheat, Eriogonum elatum. It's called winged because here's a picture of the seed, and there are little wings. You can see the little wings on the outside of the seeds. This is in a new family called the buckwheat family. Polygonaceae is a big one. This is one of the big ones in Colorado with 81 species. Keywords are small flowers with colored sepals and no petals. So there's your sepal right there. And often triangular seeds. These aren't really triangular. You know, another thing that we did not talk about was the different plant forms. And there's annuals, biennials, and perennials. An annual is a plant that grows up, grows all of its seeds in 1 year, releases its seeds, and then that plant dies, and then the seeds sprout the next year. That's an annual. A perennial is a plant that the plant doesn't die. It blooms in successive years, so it'll grow, bloom, set seeds, and then it dies back for the winter, and then it comes back. And a biennial is a plant that usually will grow. It's got a 2-year cycle. So the first year it grows just this basal rosette of leaves. Rosette is just, you know, a little clump of leaves that are all connected to the bottom of the plant like this at the base of the basal. So it grows that the first year, and then the second year it grows this again and then shoots up a flower stalk, and then the flower stalk gives off their seeds, and then it dies. But occasionally, and this is a case with buckwheat, it stays in a basal rosette for 2 or 3 years, and then flowers, and then dies, and then it starts over again. It grows another, you know, the seeds grow another basal rosette, comes back a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and then it flowers and dies. And this is called monocarpic, a monocarpic form. This plant's common in open slopes and grasslands and forests and sagebrush on the eastern and western slopes, from the plain and semi-desert shrublands to the low subalpine. So this has a big range, a big altitude range. Okay, another plant that you'll find down here is in the aster family in key 5. Pappus of capillary or barblet bristles of short scales and capillary bristles. This was I'm sorry, key 3. No, key 5. Key 3 isn't that right? Key 5. Hairy false golden aster, Heterotheca villosa. This plant grows in every Colorado county on sandy and gravelly soil from the plains to the subalpine. Another big range guy here. This is a really variable species. Which I think Weber and Whitman, let's see. Yeah, Weber and Whitman say that this is just one species, a highly variable species. But Ackerfield says this is too highly variable, and so she splits it into 6 varieties. Variety pedunculata has a solitary flowers and is found only on the western slope. So this is not pedunculata. Variety nana, she says, has leaves with contorted margins after drying. So you got to take the plant, dry it out, and see if it gets contorted margins. So in this case, I would just go with Weber and Whitman and just say Heterotheca villosa and be happy with it. This is an interesting flower in that after its initial spring flowering, each plant, drops its flowers, restores its energy, and then flowers again a few weeks later, and it repeats this cycle until fall. You could see that would be a pretty good adaptation, because you could probably live through droughts in a single season. And do pretty well. Okay, so moving on to Durango on the western slope. There's a trail called Big Canyon Trail. Again, I haven't been to this, but I've researched the trail and researched some of the flowers on it. It's part of the Grandview Ridge Trail system. Its access point is from Durango Highway 550 to Dominguez Drive near Walmart. It's 1.6 miles long, and it's a big mountain biking area. So if you go there, pay attention so you don't get killed by some crazy biker coming down 1,000,000 miles an hour. One of the plants that's found here is a common one called Western Yarrow, Killia millefolium. This plant falls into key 4 in the aster family. I just thought, this looks a little bit like a carrot, and it might confuse you because it looks like, but you'd have to look and see whether or not it had the double dealing on there. Ray and disc flowers, ray flowers, white, blue, purple, or pink. Well, that falls into the key 4. It's common on gravelly soil. And this is a plant that was brought over from Europe. In the 19th century, yarrow was said to have more medicinal indications than any other herb. It was used for inflammation, hemorrhoids, headaches, severe bruising, colds, and influenza. And like the dandelion, that it was used by so many different people. Look at how many different common names it has: plumahilo, little feather, milfoil, nosebleed, herb militaris, thousand leaf, thousand seal. Goes on and on and on. This plant is found in every county except for the far eastern plains. It's common on gravelly soil along roadsides and prairies. So you can see, you're going to see it on a disturbed site like this bike trail that you're on. It's a highly variable species, but it has a wide range from the high plains to the alpine, from 4,800 feet to 13,200 feet on the eastern and western slopes. Another one, which you've probably seen because it's pretty, well, maybe not the species, banana yucca, Yucca baccata. It gets its common name from it's a banana-shaped fruit, which you don't see here. Piccata means with berries. Evidently, the seeds are sweet. It's in a new family called the asparagus family, Asparagaceae. And this is one of these ones that was originally in the agave family. So, but it was moved into the asparagus family for genetic reasons. And so it's now in the agave subfamily with 7 species. And in that subfamily of the asparagus family, keywords were monocots. Okay, so we're back to monocots. And you can't really see them here, but when you get leaves that are long and thin like this, you very often will see the veins will run from the base to the tip and not be shaped like a little feather or a tree. Monocots with basal leaves, so all the leaves come out of the base, and a central flower stalk, which is, you can actually see here, this is the flower stalk, and brown fibrous basal wrappings on the roots. I don't like, digging up plants to look at the roots, but if you're collecting them for a herbarium, you got to do that. This grows in pinyon juniper on the west slope, which is perfect for that, because that's where the trail did. You could see the juniper trees up in here, pinyons and the junipers. Okay, so that's just to give you a little taste. I couldn't find a good trail to suggest in Grand Junction, but I'm sure that there's something there. But now let's go through the life zones. Let's start in the prairie on the eastern slope. One of my favorite places is Pawnee Buttes, which is northeast of Denver, about 2 hours and 20 minutes out I-76 in the Pawnee National Grasslands. I'd like to stop here for just a second and just talk about plant communities. Plant ecologists like to identify communities of plants that reoccur over and over again, and they call these plant communities. And they've done this because, like the Nature Conservancy and other conservation organizations, wanted to identify communities of plants that occur again and again, over and over again together, so they, they're recognizable. And some of them are quite rare, and so they identify plant communities and then identify what their rarity is, and then try to conserve the ones that are rare. And so so the plant community here is the Western Great Plains shortgrass prairie. When you're identifying plant communities, you identify them by finding and identifying the presence of the species that always occur in that community. And then, so if you find certain species, then that plant community is identified as that plant community. And in this case, the 2 indicator species are buffalo grass, Bucaloe dactyloides, and blue grama grass, Butalua gracilis. If you find these 2 grasses in a plant community, then you're looking at Western Great Plains shortgrass prairie. Buffalo grass only grows on the eastern slope, but blue grama grows pretty much anywhere. So buffalo grass is the more important of these. So Buffalo grass grows in short grass prairie and in the foothills on the east slope. And blue grama grows in all counties but three, from the plains to the foothills to the semi-desert shrublands to the mountain meadows, pinyon juniper woodlands on the eastern and western slopes. And here we are talking about another new family. And this is another biggie. I probably should have done it in the first section, but I didn't. There are 221 species of grasses in the grass family in Colorado. And the key words are grassy plants with knee-like nodes on hollow flower stems. And I guess you probably all know what a grass-like plant looks like. If you look at the stem, there's like a little ridge, and you can feel it or see it if you run your hand up it. And that's the little node, and that separates it from other grassy-like things like sedges and rushes. But this is another plant like the aster family, which has a really kind of highly evolved structure, which I'm going to go through here. It sepals. Here's your sepal down here, but they're different. There are two of them, and they're different from one another. One of them is called the palea, and one of them is called the lemma. And sometimes the lemma has an awn on it, and then the pistil, stigma, and style. Let's see. Here's your ovary in here, and then your stigma, and then your anthers are here. It has a filament and anther on it. So it's highly modified because it's not pollinated by pollinators, it's pollinated by wind. Okay, so moving on, what we see here is cactuses. New family, Cactaceae, has 16 species, and the keywords are succulent desert plants. There's one of the, it's got big pads that are like leaves, sort of, but they're succulent with spines, lots of stamens, pistils, and petals, and you can see that here. Lots of them. Bald nipple cactus, Escobaria vivipara, is small. It's maximum of 6 inches tall, and it grows in sandy areas on dry plains and mesas and in deserts. And prickly pear cactus, Opuntia macrorhiza, which is this guy down here, he grows on plains and mesas, mostly in eastern Colorado, but also in the far western, southwestern counties. Native Americans not only ate the fruits fresh cooked or dried for winter, but also roasted the pads as a vegetable, used the sap for certain medicinal applications. And in Hispanic foods, Mexican, you eat these pads on Opuntia. In the cactus family, they're kind of like three major shapes. Some of them are ball-like, which is this, like this guy here. Some of them are oblong and flat, have big oblong flat leaves like these, and then there are also some that are cylindrical. They just look like a standing stems. Okay, moving on. river lupin, Lupinus platensis. And this is in the pea family. Remember, irregular flowers with a banner, wings, and keel. It's a little, they're a little hard to see here because the keel is inside there. Has pea-like pods. And remember, it said, the keyword said often pinnate leaves, but in lupins, the leaves are not pinnate. Remember that that's kind of with a central stem with leaves off either side. They're palmate. Now, this is a classic palmate leaf. The stem comes up here and all the leaflets come out of the top. This plant's a great forage for cattle and sheep late in the fall after the grasses have dried up. But it's very toxic when it's in seed. It has something called lupin toxin in it, and it can kill livestock within an hour. So you got to be really careful about grazing your livestock where this lupin is. It's locally common on the high plains and in sandy or rocky soils only on the east slope. Another plant you find down here is in the evening primrose family. You'll remember this guy, flowering parts in fours. And a little hard to see, 1, 2, 3, 4, including a 4-part stigma. And if you look closely, it's a little hard to see there, but they have 4-part stigmas there. And then you can see the stigmas out here on this one, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is evening primrose, Onethera albicollis. It grows in the west slope semi-desert shrublands, east slope prairies, and foothills on the eastern and western slope in sandy areas. So this is a plains plant. And scarlet gora, Onethera suffrutescens. Ackerfield calls it Onethera suffrutescens, and Weber and Whitman call it Gora coccinea. So they don't agree even on the genus on this. This guy is common on the dry slopes, outcrops in sandy soil, grasslands, and short grass prairie. Okay, so now let's go up into the foothills and montane. We'll go out here on the western slope. This is Colorado National Monument down in here that we're on. You can see Grand Mesa in the background. That's a wonderful area. It's a montane subalpine, goes up to 11,300 feet. And then down in the valley between is Grand Junction. The altitude here in Colorado National Monument is about 7,000 feet. Colorado National Monument's 20,500 acres. And to give you an idea of the scale, if you look here, right where the arrow is, that's the visitor center. And then Rimrock Drive goes right along the Rimrock. It's really, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Here you will find sand onion. This is a new family. Alpha put this in a new family. The Amaryllis family, Amaryllidaceae, used to be in the onion family, but when he moved it in the Amaryllis family, he put it in the onion subfamily with 7 species. Ackerfield doesn't even recognize the Amaryllidaceae family, but she puts it in the onion family. But in any case, the keywords are the same in the onion subfamily or the onion family. Monocots, again, with the leaves with parallel veins, onion-like bulbs, flowers grouped in an umbel. Remember our umbel with the carrot family are with double umbel. This is a single umbel, but all the flowers come out, their pedicels come out of the top of the stem. Small flowers grouped in an umbel emerging from a spade-like bract. And it's hard to see, but this is the bract. It comes out right from the bottom of all of these stems. It's sort of like a leaf, but it's a bract that comes out. I'm tracing the edge of it there. So you get that bract, and then you get the umbel, and then you get the flowers. And remember, in a monocot, the sepals and petals are in 3s and 6s. Another plant that you find down here is narrow-leaf puccoon. This is in the borage family. The borage family has 5 united petals. So the petals are united into kind of a tube down here. 5 separate sepals, which is very hard to see here, but they would be down at the base of that tubular neck. As a tubular neck like chiming bells. This is found in all but 4 counties in Colorado on the eastern Great Plains, western semi-desert shrublands, and open slopes and meadows of the foothills and montane up to 9,500 feet. Puccoon is a Native American word. It's their common name for plants where the roots were used for dyes. I don't know what color dye they got from this, but they evidently got a colored dye from the root. And the zuni, powdered, the root made a powdered root mixture as a salve to reduce swelling. So that's in this guy, there. Okay, moving on. We're into another new family. This plant is called Mirabilis multiflora, Colorado 4 o'clock. This plant's common in open places and shale outcrops, sometimes under old pinyons and junipers, and along roadsides. This has 2 forms. In dry places, it has sort of kind of a sprawling branches with a few flowers. And in wet places, it has huge showy mounds with lots of flowers. And that's obviously this guy here. The key words for this family, Nyctaginaceae, 4 o'clock family with 18 species, has tubular flowers with 5 colored sepals, but no petals, just the sepals. And I put this illustration in so that you could see it. It has a superior ovary. So the ovary is above the sepals, which are here. No petals. 5 petal-like sepals united into a tube. It's a little hard to see the tube here because I'm looking right down on it. Another plant that you see here is scarlet gilia. It's in a new family again, Hypomopsis aggregata. Grows in semi-desert shrublands or grasslands and foothills, montane, often along roadsides, and in all counties except on the eastern plains. It rarely has yellow flowers, and it blooms in late spring or fall. This flower was originally collected by Meriwether Lewis in the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1806. They collected a lot of species that had been seen by Europeans for the first time. So this is a new family called the Phlox family, and the key words are 5 united sepals, which are down here. You can see that they're only cut down halfway. 5 united petals forming tubular flowers. with a flat face. So the petal tips come out flat. When we were talking about recurved, if these were recurved, these things would bend all the way back toward the bottom of the stem, but they're not recurved, they're flat. No, this is it's a beautiful flower. I love this. Next one is in the aster family, and this fell into key 1, only ray flowers with milky or colored sap. Remember, it was the dandelion. Usually perfect flowers with 5 terminal teeth. And you can see the terminal teeth there. And this is another perfect example of flower that's highly variable. This is the same species, but it looks quite different. Grows on dry, sandy, open areas, often in sandy or shale soil. It's only in the western counties, and it blooms from May until July. Weber and Whitman don't recognize any varieties. Ackerfield splits the grandiflora into 3 varieties. So she splits it, but Weber and Whitman just say, oh, no, it's just a highly variable. It depends on your point of view. The variety is her most common variety is called grandiflora. And then the other 2 varieties are variety Arizonica and Dolorensis. And she splits them because the bracts are different. The bracts, which you can't see, the bracts would be underneath the flower. Remember when we flip it over, there were a lot of different, there were bracts underneath there. And this falls into key 1. Okay, so now let's go up into the montane, up to Gothic Mountain Meadows near Crested Butte. Gothic is a ghost town.
Mo, can
Yeah.
I interrupt you for 1 second? It is 11:52. I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, man. Oh, what am I going to do?
But folks, how about if you want to continue, if folks need to leave, I will be sending the recording at the once I publish it.
Yeah.
So does that sound good?
That sounds good. I have a ton to go. God, I don't know how I got so slow. Yeah, if people can stand it, I'll keep going. Maybe I'll move a little bit faster.
I just want to, in case anyone is going to leave, let me just say thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your presence here. We hope that we see you again soon. Please check the calendar. We've been working really hard to calendar throughout the year. So you can sign up for programs all throughout the year. Please do that. Because as we move from web-based programs to field programs, there is a cap on how many people can come. So make sure you get in there and get yourself registered if you're interested. Thank you so much also for paying to be here. Most of our programming is free and organized by our chapter volunteers and our committee volunteers. And thank you to all of you here who participate in such things. If you have a program that you're interested in giving to the society, inside every calendar item, there's a link where you can tell us about that and we'll get back to you. So thank you so much, and I'll send you the recording and we will keep going for those who would like to stay.
Yeah, actually, I think that this is almost always gone until 1. We probably should have said 4 hours.
Absolutely. Well, it's
Anyway,
okay.
Okay. Anyway, Gothic is a ghost town, which was a thriving silver mine from 1879 to 1896, with 1,000 residents, 200 buildings. In 1928, it was declared a ghost town and was purchased by Dr. John Johnson and converted into Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory, which specializes in botanical and ecological research. This is also where they run a wonderful flower festival out of Crested Butte that runs in mostly during July. So the kind of thing you're going to see here is starry Solomon seal, Myanthrum stellatum. It's has green and black striped berries, changing to deep red berries in the fall. And it's common in forests and shady places and streams from the plains to the alpine. It's in the asparagus family, but in the beargrass subfamily of the asparagus family. And the key words there are monocot flowers. Remember the leaves without the leaves with the parallel veins. And sepals and petals are similar size and color. It's, so 3 of these are sepals and 3 of them are petals. You only could tell, which are which by looking at, who connects lower on the stem. 5 stamens and a 3-parted pistil. Used to be in the lily family, and it's a beautiful little plant. Another plant you're going to find here is Virginia strawberry. It's in the rose family. Remember, usually 5 sepals, petals, usually 5 or more stamens, numerous pistils, oval, finely serrated, and toothed leaves. This one falls into the family with a trifoliate leaf subfamily. It has a trifoliate leaf. Another plant which is really interesting is the monument plant, Frasera speciosa, which is in the gentian family with 23 species. It has opposite leaves, mostly tubular flowers. This is and parts in 4s or 5s. This is common on open slopes, and it grows to up to 6 feet tall, so it's pretty easy to see in the up in the montane there, because it's towers above all the other plants. This was thought to be a biennial, which had a basal rosette in the first year. Remember, the biennial has a basal rosette in the first year, and then it blooms in the second year. But this plant can live for 20 to 80 years as a short rosette of leaves, and then bloom once and dies. So it's monocarpic, like the winged buckwheat. This one, which you're probably aware of, is Colorado blue columbine, Aquilegia coralia. Remember, in the buttercup family, 3 to multiple simple pistils in the center of the flower. Petals, sepals, stamens, and pistils are all separate, not fused. You can see they're cut all the way to the base. And this is in the buttercup family, we have hooked tips on the pistils. This is the Colorado state flower, grows on the eastern and western slopes, and it's found in every county except on the eastern plains. It's found in meadows, along streams, and in forests, and in the alpine. And there is a form which is rarely found about Rocky Mountain National Park, which doesn't have the spurs. And this is called the Forma dalei. And interesting, I don't know of any other plant that, rather than calling it a variety or subspecies. It's called a forma, ROI. So, any questions before we go into the last section?
Thanks, Mo. Well, we've been having some conversation in the chat about Achillea millefolium and its nativity because you mentioned that it was native to Europe. And Ackerfield notes it as being native to Colorado, and USDA Plants Database says it's native and introduced all across North America. Pam offers another reference that from the Fire Ecosystem Information System that distinguishes native versus non-native. So what do you think?
I think that it's I think that it's native and non-native. I mean, it was obviously brought over here because it was obviously brought over here from Europe for all the medicinal purposes, but there may have been, a native variety of it here. Because remember, I said that it was very variable. So that I think probably it was here, but it was also brought. That would be my take on it.
And the word Pangea came up too, just the idea that it's such an old world plant, and it's one plant that I lecture about because it's the same species no matter what elevation you're at, and the only other yarrow in Colorado is yellow and it is non-native. And so it's just interesting that it has
Yeah.
survived the genetic exploration as still being one species.
Yeah, there's a species of monkey flower that does the same thing. It was brought over from Europe, but it existed here, Mimulus machatus, and and then it was taken back to Europe. I'm getting kind of mixed up because I'm trying to think of whether or not it started in Europe. No, I know, no, I think it was found here, it was taken back to Europe, and people planted it in their flower boxes, and then it was brought back to New England and reintroduced in New England. But it occurs also out here, so it's another one of those things where it's a little bit difficult to figure out, what's native and what's non-native.
And one thing I'll note to this is if you were at the conference, or if not, come on Monday because we're replaying the conference talks on the 15th of each month. But one thing that was interesting to me was there were like ethnobotanical stories about a lot of non-native plants, but they've been here so long that they've been incorporated into the indigenous narrative.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if there's any other questions. We were talking about sepals, petals, and tepals. And then you just mentioned it just a minute ago that sepals are closest to the stem and then the petals. And when they are similar, they're called tepals, but that's
Yeah.
the only thing I can say about it.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of that, this guy. The thing I might ask you this, Maggie, if you have just one or the other, and you have just sepals or just petals, how do you know which is which? Why? How do you know something is a sepal if there's no petals there?
I have no idea.
Oh,
Keep in mind, I'm a restoration ecologist. Most things I know about botany, I learned at the Colorado Native Plant Society.
okay. I'll have to figure that one out maybe. Okay, are we ready for the subalpine?
Sure.
Okay. So now we go to one of my favorite places, Old Squaw Pass. It's a spruce fir forest, and it's subalpine, and it's on Squaw Pass Road, which you take from Evergreen in Evergreen, and it's up 12 miles on a dirt road just beyond Echo Mountain ski area, and it was an old CCC camp, Citizens Conservation Corps. And it's interesting to me because it's considered to be an Eastern relictual forest. And what I mean by that is a relictual population of plants is called a population that presently occurs in a restricted area, but whose original range was far wider during a previous geologic epoch. And so what happened is 75 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains had not risen up yet. And so, the winds and the moisture came from the west slope, and just flowed all the way across the plains. And as a result of that, the eastern forests spread across the plains in long fingers and reached as far as the Rocky Mountains. And then from 70 million to 30 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains rose up to their current height and cast a rain shadow east onto the plains. And so all of those forests retreated back to the east, but the very ends of them remained on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. And so you find plants, specific species of plants that occur on the east slope of the Rocky Mountains and sometimes further west of that. That are plants that are from the eastern part of the country, but are not found on the plains at all. So they're totally separate now. They've disjunct. And so there's some really neat plants that I find up in my place I have a place up in Maine. And so the same species are found there as here, and there are a few of them. The first is twin flower, Linnea borealis. It's locally common on most forests on the alpine slopes on the east and west slopes. And this grows in Preble Island in Maine, which is right near Acadia National Park. And this is what the forest looks like. Looks exactly like this. The species has spruce and fir species, but the species are different. But this plant occurs there and falls into a new family called the honeysuckle family, Caprifoliaceae, with 28 species. And the key words are bushes with opposite leaves, which you can't really see here because they're down here. But with flowers and berries usually paired. So here you see, a pair of flowers, and they'll turn into berries. And they have pithy stems. This is it looks like this looks like an herb, but it's actually an evergreen subshrub. It's woody on the bottom. So it really is a shrub, even though it's really, really small. A beautiful little flower that in Maine blooms in the spring. Another one is in the dogwood family, Cornaceae, which is another new family with the keywords trees, shrubs, or woody plants with opposite or whorled leaves, and you can see the leaves are whorled here, showy bracts, and fleshy fruits. And this one, this is a photo of this species in Sorrento, Maine, And then a photo of a species that I took here in Squaw Pass. And it's the same species. It's not a subspecies. It's not split that way. And again, it looks like a herbaceous plant, but it's actually it's woody. It's got a woody base to it. And then a third one is in the heath family, which is another new family. And this is in called one-flowered pyrola monoesis uniflora. It's common in moist shaded forests along shaded streams on the eastern and western slope. And the plant reproduces from underground roots. So you often find several plants grouped together. The heath family's keywords are mostly red, pink, or white bell-shaped flowers. So these are not bell-shaped because that would, it would have kind of a neck on it if it was. With flower parts in fives, and leaves are often evergreen. This has now been put into the pyrola subfamily, which the keywords are evergreen flower forest plants with waxy looking flowers, parts and fives. And it was moved from the pyrola family in this genetic upheaval. And this is a picture of a map with the distribution of this plant on it to show you how it's found, on the west, and it's found in the east, but it's not found in the plains where the rain shadow is. But originally, these plants came from the northeast. Okay, then moving up into the Alpine, Herman Gulch. Herman Gulch has willow car, wet meadow, and wetland plants. Herman Gulch is found an hour west of Denver on I-70. And you hike from exit 218, that's just before you go through the tunnel. And you hike up into the Alpine Meadows. The trail starts at 10,332 feet and climbs to 12,018. And unfortunately now, it used to climb through lodgepole pine forest, but that forest was largely killed by the pine beetle. So it's a lot more open than it used to be. And I haven't been there in a few years, but it probably is much more lush than when I did it, when I last did it, which was just after the pine beetle came in and killed the forest. But here you find one of my favorite plants. It's in the buttercup family, monkshood, Contium columbianum. It's in the buttercup family. Remember, 3 to multiple simple pistils at the center of the flower. All petals, sepals, stamens, pistils are separate from one another. And it has hooked pistil tips. And I got to get rid of this thing at the bottom here. Hide. There. This is remember in the buttercup family we have regular and irregular flowers. This is an irregular flower with 5 sepal-like petals. The upper sepal is hood-like, which is this guy up here, and the 2 petals are hidden inside the sepal, and it has a coiled spur at the apex. Another one of my favorite plants is elephant lousewort, Pedicularis groenlandica. We saw this one early in the first section, but it's my favorite, so I'm going to show it again. It's common in moist meadows and marshes along stream beds. And this was one that was moved into the broomrape family, Orobanchaceae. These were parasitic plants. Remember, it was moved from the Scrophulariaceae, the figwort family, and this is one which is parasitic. I'm not sure what it attaches onto, but it attaches onto somebody else. And you know, once you see this one, you're never going to have a problem identifying it again because these look like little elephant heads. Another one that you're going to find up here is in the gentian family. This is another new family. Has opposite leaves, which you can see here, here. Mostly tubular flowers with parts in 4s or 5s. And this, like another family that we talked about earlier, Mertensia, that wasn't a family, but the stamens are attached to the inside of the petals. This was first collected by Charles Parry in the 19th century in Colorado, and that's where the Parry comes from. We had another Parry, I can't quite remember which flower that was. It was another something Parry. Okay, the next one is another new family in the orchid family. This orchid is Plantethra dilata. Dilata refers to the bottom petal, which is dilated at the base. And you find this in moist meadows and spruce fir forests. The orchid family has 26 species in Colorado. And they're called irregular monocot flowers with a distinctive inferior ovary. And this is the only monocot plant with irregular blossoms. Remember the monocots? And it's the fact that it can only be cut in one direction. And here's the ovary down here below the petals. It has 3 sepals, 3 petals, and the sepals can be green or colored like the petals. And the lower petal, which is this guy down here, is often modified into a sort of sac. I don't know if you've ever seen a lady slipper, but that lady slipper has that sac at the bottom, pink lady slipper. And the ovary is inferior and elongates into a seed capsule while the flowers are still present. So see, this is a seed capsule with the flowers still present. Okay, the last place that we're going. It's Mount Evans at Summit Lake. You get up to Summit Lake by going to Idaho Springs and taking 103 north. It's about an hour and a half from Denver. Do not go on the weekends. It's jammed packed with people. But I wanted to do one more group of plants in the alpine called cushion plants. NatureServe, which describes the location of cushion plants is flat ridges covered with heavy snow with often sparse vegetation. This is a perfect example of a cushion plant community. These are plants that grow only a few inches tall, and they do that because they live in a really, really tough environment. First species in this group is Western moss campion in a new family called the pink family, Caryophyllaceae. There are 57 species. And the key words in this plant are coarse plants with woody stems, split petal ends, and flower parts in 5s. you can't see that this is woody, but because it looks grassy, but if you press on it, it's very stiff, and it grows in a kind of a cushion shape. This is the first species to grow in disturbed habitats. It grows in almost all Arctic alpine habitats, north as far as within 25 miles of the furthest north plant. So it goes way, way up into the Arctic. It grows fairly rapidly. It's described as growing fairly rapidly to 10 inches diameter in 20 years. So that's not fairly rapidly. But the interesting thing about this plant is most of it's underground. The roots penetrate to 3 to 6 feet underground. This is a better example of the pink family. White sandwort, which is also found up there, Minuardia obtusiloba. Weber calls this Lydia obtusifolia. Ackerfield in her first book called it Minuardia obtusiloba, and in her second book called it Schilleria obtusiloba. So there's, I don't know, it's one of these plants that nobody can really agree on. But this gives you an idea. If you press on these leaves, and those are leaves that just crammed together in a mat, it feels really hard. And the other thing about cushion plants is the relationship of the leaf size to the flower size. The leaves are tiny and the flowers are really big, and that's because the growing season is really short, so the plant doesn't invest much energy in growing the leaves. They concentrate on the flowers. Another plant is Trifolium nanum. This is in the pea family, regular flowers, banner wings and keel, pea-like pods, often pinnate leaves. The leaves of this plant are not pinnate, they are trifoliate, and you can't really tell that, but they have trifoliate because they have 3 little leaflets on the stem. Interesting thing is, they say pea-like pods. I've tried everywhere to find out what the fruit of this plant looks like, and I can't find it anywhere. I've gone all over the web and everything. I have no idea what the fruit looks like. Another one of my favorite plants up here is in the buttercup family, the snow buttercup, Ranunculus adonius. This plant grows right on the edge of snowbanks. As snowbanks are melting back, you will find this within a foot or two of the edge of the snowbank. It just blooms really fast. And you can see the relationship of the leaves, which are tiny, to the flowers, which are really quite big. I think they're about a couple of inches in diameter. And they say that bees like to, when they come in here and pollinate, they just lie in here because it's kind of like lying in a sun, one of these sun house things. And then the last one, Lloydia aplily. This is also Weber and Whitman and Ackerfield in her first book called it Lloydia serotina, but Ackerfield in her their second book called it Gagia serotina, Gagea. What an awful name for anything. Anyway, this species is in the lily family. We've talked about species that were in the lily family that aren't anymore, but this one is in the lily family. Keywords are monocot flowers with parts in threes and leaves with parallel veins. And in lilies, the sepals and petals are usually identical. And again, three of these are sepals and three are petals. So that is pretty much it. These are the books that I referred to in this. Botany in a Day by Elpful is really good to get familiar with the major plant families. Weber and Whitman is one of the keys, split into the eastern and western slope. And Ackerfield has written two, this her first edition and her second edition. There are a couple of other books that are really neat that I highly recommend. Colorado's Best Wildflower Hikes by Pamela and David Irwin. They're great books. They'll take you to a trail, give you the directions to a trail, and then as you're walking the trail, they will describe the flowers that you'll find along the way. So those are really neat. There's also a volume 3, which is relates to for hikes in the San Juan Mountains. And then a couple of keys that are really wonderful. The Alpine Flower Finder by Lorraine Yates is a wonderful it's a small 5x7 book with pen and ink illustrations of all the alpine flowers. The keys are wonderful. The illustrations are really clear. And if you're going into the alpine, that's all I take. I don't take anything else because the keys are wonderful. And then Jan Wingate wrote the Rocky Mountain Flower Finder, and that was a more general one about the flowers that you'll find in the montane. It's not quite as effective because whereas Lorraine covers all of the 340 alpine flowers, the Rocky Mountain Flower Finder can't cover them all because there are so many in the montane. A couple of other things here. There are a couple of neat websites by CONUPS members, which Eastern Colorado Wildflowers by Ernie Marks, and Wildflowers, Ferns and Trees of Colorado by Al Schneider. And then a great site to go to, SciNet, which has a listing, has collections, all the plants that have collected by herbaria in the West. That's really, really a wonderful site to figure out. There's mapping stuff on there, and you can get lists of flowers by locations and stuff. And then one more thing that I can't. I've got to tell you about is an app for your phone called iNaturalist. It's an app designed to encourage citizen science, but it's really, really cool. I use it all the time. And the way it works is that you load it into your iPhone, take a photo of the plant, it collects the photo, and it collects the time and the date and the location. And then you press this, what did you see? And it will try to identify the species for you. And it does it on a really, it does it a lot more than you would think. It has huge collection of photographs that they're obviously using artificial intelligence on now. The other thing about this is that you can check out the location of where you've taken the photo to make sure it's correct. And then what you do is it gives you, in this case that I identified that as showy milkweed, Asclepias speciosa, which we're familiar with. The other thing that you can do is to go to a location and then push explore, and it will give you, it's very hard to see on here, but there are these little green pins all over here. And those are pins of collections that other people have made. So you just click on that, and then it pulls up this and it tells you, what the species is there and when it was collected, and it shows you a map of where it was. And so that's a really, really neat app. After you've done all of that, you can do share, and it will send your observation into the cloud, and somebody, it might even be Maggie Gaddis, will say, "Yep, that's Asclepius," and she'll verify that you've got the right species, and that comes to you, in your email. You get, "Yep, you got the right species." So that is iNaturalist, and that's the end of this. And well, it was only 3.5 hours. That wasn't too bad, I guess. So, any questions?